Hello and welcome to the 2022 Boston College Arts Festival. I'm the Visual Arts Coordinator, Yifan Wang.
And I'm the Visual Arts Coordinator Assistant, Megan Cassidy.
And now you're listening to the Artist Podcast series presented by the Boston College Arts Council Office. Hi, Eddy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Yifan?
I'm good. Good to see you here.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the interview.
Of course. We'd love to have you here. Well, we'll start from a brief introduction about you. Tell us about your year, major, minor, anything you want us to know about you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm a senior, class of 2022 in Lynch, studying applied psychology and theology. And I'm also halfway into BC's mental health counseling program, where I will spend the next 2 years of my academic career still at BC. Yeah, I took Photoshop class last summer, and I've always been interested in graphic design and manipulating different images. So I make fun of my friends or like making memes. So I thought this would be something meaningful to do for the Arts Fest this year.
Nice. All right, we'll start with the piece you submitted and tell us about the work you submitted, what's the story behind it, and the technique you were using.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I drew this inspiration from my Photoshop class with the topic for the week was altered history. So if you could change history, a historical moment, what would you do and how do you reflect that in a Photoshop image? And so I took this class in the heat of all the Asian hate crimes during earlier last year during COVID. And I thought, and that's when I was really challenged to think more about Asian American history and what it means to be Asian in America. Did a lot of research, and I found out that the first wave of Asian immigrants were actually Chinese workers came here initially because of the gold rush, but they found themselves only able to find jobs working for the Transcontinental Railroad. So they became very exploited railroad workers because the company they were working for, as well as their white colleagues, were very racist towards them. They were underpaid and their work wasn't even acknowledged. And so if I were to alter history, this is a moment I want to change. It's a historical moment when the railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. And they took this photo to celebrate the completion. And in the photo, there's no Chinese workers' faces whatsoever. And all of the faces are those of the white workers. And I thought, if the Chinese workers put so much work into this, making it possible and helping with America's economy and pretty much building this country up, they should be acknowledged too. And so my work is to bring back those faces to recognize that they are an integral part of American history, and Chinese Americans have been a part of their American identity has been solidified for the past 100, at least 70 years. And so if you don't mind, I can screen share real quick. So as you can see, this is the work that was in progress in Photoshop. This image, everything was taken from Google Image, and you can find this photo too. Probably taken in late 1850s or early 1860s. And all the workers originally in this image are white. And you can see on the left side, I decided to swap half of the faces to Asian faces. If we zoom in, you can see more closely.
Yes.
Some of the faces I did a good job with, but some of the other ones look really fake. If I click on this little eye icon, I think you can see that the faces will revert back to the original photo. Yes. So yeah, that's pretty much what I did. It was a grueling process because there's so many faces, and I really wanted to all the Asian faces that I swapped to represent the original Asian people who worked on the railroad. So digging through a Google image and finding the photos of the Chinese workers, as well as swapping their faces on here, masking them, changing the lighting and brightness or contrast. It was a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. Turns out, I guess, pretty good if you don't look too closely. And I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, of course. But I think the whole point of not blending in and even revealing that this is a Photoshop work adds a different layer to the work as a
True.
whole.
Yeah.
Because it really is like, this is not the real history, which is heartbroken in a way, because you know this is not real. And it requires future Photoshop work to actually reveal the real history in the past.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I think, yeah, that's that's a lot of encouragement. I think, yes, this is intentional. I didn't want it to be perfect because people can tell that the history was not perfect, and therefore we need to change it, or we can change the history, but we can at least remember what happened and not make the same mistake again. Through maybe this image can be a reminder to people of what happened in the past.
Of course. The work you submitted to our submission form has a New York Times frame to it.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's really just another, I guess I don't have to put that on. I just thought if I wanted to look more authentic, like it's actually being recognized by a bigger audience, maybe I can just publish it on New York Times. And I look for the fonts New York Times uses for their titles and for like how they structure their titles, subtitles, and authors and dates. Also, oh yeah, that's about it. And I just thought it would be look more authentic, or express my desire of this to be known by people, to be recognized by a bigger audience, because Asian American history is still very much hidden from the public. A lot of times textbooks don't talk about them as much, and the struggles of Asian immigrants, their experiences with racism and xenophobia were not acknowledged. And I think it's just my way of expressing this strong desire for their history and their stories to be heard by putting it up on New York Times.
But I also think it is very interesting point you made to have this photoshopped so-called fake historical record published on New York Times. I think it also talks about this recent fake news about this kind of, fake news, hidden stories behind the real history and stories. And I think it also serves as a reminder to audience, always take a grain of salt when you're reading all the news, especially nowadays on social media. Even those major publishers, news media, are not as trustworthy as they are, but also history is written by the winners and by the stronger. So we always know that history is not fact. History is always contrived by human beings. And it is important to realize that with the traces of Photoshop, with the fake New York Times title that you photoshopped. And I think it's even adds more layers to this work when you Photoshop the New York Times title to it.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I can screen share real quick of the version with the New York Times title on top. So like, I think, you brought up a great point. And also I think, so I titled it Bring Back the Forgotten Railroad Workers. It kind of implies that, I'm bringing them back through this image. And so they weren't here originally. So like, in a way, it's not fake news, but I see what you're talking about too.
Yes.
So yeah, like you said, different layers. And I guess I didn't intend it to be as complicated or as in depth, but
sorry, it's occupational hazard of our history major. But yeah, I think because the nature of photography, you think, oh, this captures the reality, because it, it really represent what it was at that instantaneous moment, what was things like in the past at that moment. But sometimes it's not what we see on the surface, and things are not what they appear to be as they were taken on the photograph. And with nowadays like modern news, we usually use photographies
Mhm.
as the visual aid for the news.
Yeah.
But sometimes we forgot they can be photoshopped.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
be contrived. They can be fictional as
Yeah,
well.
for sure. The other day I was listening to this podcast. I think it's WBUR, talking about media literacy and how we should not trust everything we see. And we hear something, especially on social media platforms like TikTok, we really need to take it with a grain of salt. We need to do a little research ourselves into like who said what and whether the information is accurate, whether this person who made the statement has credibility and where they come from. So I think you said yes, like photography. I think photographers has a responsibility to disclose these informations and be honest about how and why they manipulated certain images. And I think maybe through the description I submitted, along with the photoshopped image, I was pretty clear on this is a photoshopped image and this is the intention for it. And I guess something else I could have done is actually put this image into Photoshop itself, so you can see all the like editing tools on the side. So yeah, I think it's important going forward for everyone who goes on social media, who checks out news on different websites, to be mindful that not everything you see is credible, and some websites more than others and some authors more than others. And for the content producers, they need to be aware of this phenomenon that's going on with fake news and exaggerated, biased perspectives, and try to be balance creative art expression with reality, and mostly trying to be as communicative as possible on what's going on and what they did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can be agree with you more.
Yeah.
Anything else about this work you want people to pay attention to when they look at the work in person?
Well, not really. I think it's pretty clear what I did with the piece and the intention behind it. Kind of want people to arrive at their own conclusions instead of me telling them what to think. As long as they know they know the history, how I intentioned it, and it's really up for interpretation. Like whether it's about wanting the history to actually change or wanting us to prevent the same mistakes from happening again in the future, it's up to the audience. I also want to say my inspiration for doing this kind of work was really inspired by my friend Yifan, who majored in art history, and me wanting to think more deeply about like what's the utility of art in my life, because I'm a very practical person, I think. Like, but who said art cannot be practical? It's just the fact that I grew up with always thinking I need to do something useful to apply it to my life so I can actually use it. But like this is a piece of art, you can't really use it for anything. But over the years and through conversations with her, the interviewer, I realized art can actually change people's heart and mind. Art can transform people's lives. Art can help people express their ideas and opinions that are not present in other places. And so something I intend to do more in the future, and I see great utility in creating artwork. And I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to learn Photoshop with BC. And I would love to engage in more conversations with different art communities in the future.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Of course, that was flattering.
That was flattering, for sure. Thank you for giving me the credit. Yeah. Art, since it's not as literary as writing or other form of words, it really transcends the boundary between language, especially photography. And when you look at it, you realize, without reading anything or knowing anything about English or the writing you have on the work, you realize, oh, this is, first of all, this is a photo from the past because of this graininess and this the black and white or grayscale to it. And then you start looking at it in details, you realize, oh, some of the faces are Photoshop. They are not the original photographs. And then you start exploring the story behind it, and you realize, oh, the photoshopped photograph is actually the real history. And the real history from the past is not the real history. And then for me, I even looked it up, your article online. I thought, oh, maybe Eddy has this work published on New York Times. So I Googled the New York Times, bring back the title of your work, and even added Shuai Jiang on the by the end. And I was like, sadly, I didn't get any result back from Google. But I think it makes people realize how real history got washed away because of this power dynamic or this history from the past, you know? So
that was put beautifully. Thank you. Thank you for even Googling the title.
I think that's, you know, it's like, wow, real history didn't get recorded, but fake or like partially correct history got recorded and passed on in the history books. And it's sad for future generations to recover and disclose real history. So I think this is such a rich work, and you probably realize.
Yeah,
So
thank you. That means a lot.
And
I did get one of the highest points in my class for this piece.
Of course, you sign your signature. Yeah, I think that's the power of art. That's the power of creativity and critical thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Yifan. It's nice talking with you.
Of course. And thank you, Eddy. And we are looking for future work from you in the future Arts Fest.
Okay. Yeah. I look
be
forward
here for a couple of years, at least. Yeah.
I might do PhD here, so I have 10 more years of working with y'all.
So people here out there looking for Eddy's work in the future.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.